In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be discussing the chaos surrounding the Serie A schedule. We'll be previewing the upcoming match against Napoli and Sassuolo, and special guest Janusz Michallik, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com.
Recupera Brozovic, andiamo in contropiede, la porta è vuota, tira, attenzione, e gol, e gol!
Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host, Nima Ruzzari, welcoming everyone to what can only be described an absolutely chaotic Serie A and Lega Calcio after this weekend's madness. We'll get into all of that, but first let me introduce our panel, starting with Mr. Positivity, who I actually think is the one who's struggling the most to find anything to be positive about this week. SempreInter.com's own preview writer, Mr. Mohammed Nassar.
Hey! Yeah, very, 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 very slim pickings for any room for positivity this week, but that's it.
Yeah, it sure is. And we're also joined by our good friend from Canada in Toronto, the producer for TSN, and our very own expert on refereeing issues, Mr. Michael Gallo.
Well, I was hoping on talking about a derby win this weekend, but unfortunately we don't have that opportunity, so we'll talk about many other things, and very excited also to have one of my favorite soccer analysts on the show today, Janusz, so very excited about that.
Hi, Michael.
And as Michael alluded to over there, we have a very special guest with us today, someone who I've wanted to have on the show for quite some time, and I'm really grateful that he took the time out of his busy schedule to come on. He's a TV commentator and studio analyst for ESPN. He also hosts Premier League and UEFA Champions League shows, making his Studio Inter debut. Welcome, Mr. Janusz Michallik.
Hello, guys. Yeah, it's a big pleasure. I didn't know you guys allowed Milan fans on your podcast. But,
we do.
It's all good. You know, I love Serie A, and I can be I can hold my bias, I suppose. Although Milan have even bigger problems than you guys have. I'm reading about Boban and Maldini and Elliott Group and all this stuff. But okay, let's not spoil the Inter fun.
No. There's the Serie A is anything but it's anything but boring and not eventful. And these we're going to get into all of that. But before I do, I want to introduce our last panelist. Last but not least, he lives all the way in Florida, and I think he's the only one except for Mo who's the happiest about the climate he's living in right now. Welcome back, Mr. Alex Dono.
Thank you so much. And I was able to get my Inter fix yesterday because Inter Miami made their MLS debut. So at least there was an Inter playing somewhere yesterday.
I just died inside when you said that.
And how many goals did they score, Alex? How many goals?
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting on their debut goal.
Just as many as Inter did this weekend.
Yes.
But I got to say, I watched a bit of that, and that stadium looks amazing.
Well, they were playing in Los Angeles, so we're yet to see. Yeah, and it was, but I had the same impression because I don't watch a whole lot of MLS, and that was probably maybe the third time I've really sat and watched an MLS game from start to finish. So it was a road game, but the crowd in LA was great. They were chanting the entire time, and the stadium was very loud.
Yeah, it looked really, really good. Right. Let's move on. Let's focus on what we're supposed to talk about, and I want to start with you, Janusz, because I don't want to talk about. I suppose we have to talk about it because it's kind of on everybody's lips. But I'm kind of keen to hear what you make of the mess that the Serie A has made of this the Lega Calcio, that is the league itself, the people who run the league, and the mess they've made out of moving games, postponing some games being played, some not being played, some being said that they're going to be played behind closed doors, then 24 hours before kickoff they're not being played. And now, then they suddenly decide, without speaking to the other clubs in the league, that they're going to reschedule it. And the president, Dal Pino, goes out and says that he has the support of all the teams in the Serie A, only for 9 directors and coaches of Serie A teams to come out and say that they don't support him. I mean, what do you make of all this? Where do you even begin?
Well, look, I mean, nobody's going to win that argument, right? Somebody's always going to be unhappy. But for me, from a, and I'm going to talk about from a playing standpoint in my head, if I had to think about that, right? I mean, first of all, health risks, of course, are very important, and that's the most important thing. When that's said and done, if I'm in charge of that, you can't help but look at the competitive advantage because it does exist. I'm never a believer of a game in hand, regardless of what position I'm in, first, second, third, or fourth, because you still have to win him. And at the very least, if it was up to me, I play him behind closed doors. I know there's pressure from broadcasters. I work for one. I know how that works. But at the end of the day, you have to look at yourself and say to yourself, well, Lazio in this situation, if you were going to postpone games, I mean, certainly I would have postponed Lazio. I wouldn't care if the people liked it or not. I mean, it's a health crisis that probably exists everywhere. It doesn't seem to be in Rome, but I can't believe in that. I'm sure there's something there. But aside from that, I look at one of the most competitive races in recent history that involves actually more than two teams, right? Three teams here, and you say to yourself, you've got to play it. Either play everybody behind the closed doors. I know it's Derby d'Italia. I know it's big. It's going to be watched worldwide, but so what? It's too close. It's too important to postpone that to play it in May or whenever. Even if it was 2 weeks from now, it's not good enough. Lazio have taken advantage, as we all knew they would have against Bologna. But I would have played this game today or tomorrow as soon as possible. To say to yourself and hope that this game is going to be meaningful on May 13th, that's all great. That's all great. But if I'm Inter or Juve player, I'd go ballistic.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to hand you over to Mo because I know he has a question for you, Janusz.
Yeah, Janusz, I mean, we were preparing for this podcast before the mayhem, and I wanted to ask a question about the state of Inter's squad in general. Much has been made in the media recently of the potential transfer of Lautaro to Barca, and much has been made in the media of the potential names coming from Barca to Inter. If, in fact, Inter were offered Antoine Griezmann for Lautaro and some cash, would this be a good deal for Inter, in your opinion?
I mean, it's very difficult to compare the players, especially players that I think to some degree are different, although maybe not so much, right? Because we're kind of almost gotten used to Antoine Griezmann playing wide, and we all know that he's not a wide player. He's very much kind of in behind the main striker player. So I think they're comparable by position where they feel most comfortable, right? But if you see Lautaro right now, that's a tough sell, right? Because for me, psychology and perception is everything. I always say that, and I look at Inter and I think to some degree, and by the way, players force those moves, right? I mean, sometimes there's very little you can do about that. But if Inter want to be great, I mean, you're not sending a good message, right? In sending Lautaro Martinez. I mean, it's as simple as that. We can get in behind what kind of player is Griezmann. He hasn't been good, but maybe if he changes environment, he's going to be better. Who knows? I don't know that for a fact. All I know is right now, I look at a partnership between Romelu Lukaku and Lautaro Martinez, and it's near perfect. And in fact, Lukaku is better. And by the way, I have to eat my words because I think it was with Bandini or Horncastle. I don't know who it was. I thought he was just going to be an okay player in Serie A. I didn't see him explode.
We all pretty much did, yeah.
Yeah, well, so good. At least I'm not alone in this mess. but I mean, he's been great. And Lautaro Martinez, I think finally, I don't know if it's the environment. I don't know if it's the manager. Maybe it's just, sometimes you have a couple of years under your belt and he's starting to fulfill what we all thought he had, right? And so now, if you sell him, I think, look, this is an opportunity for Inter, right? It's been a while since we've talked about Inter in the terms of this, one of the greatest in Europe, right? I mean, since the, maybe Mourinho and all that. Yeah. So I just think it's a wrong message. And let's take it aside. If Lautaro wants to force that move, there's very little you can do about it. Or you say, look where we are right now. We have good ownership group that has the money, and we are Inter, and we want to be amongst Barcelona, Real Madrid, Liverpool, all the greatest clubs. And Lautaro stay because we have big plans to buy another 1 or 2 or 3 players, and we are in fact are going to be competitive with Barcelona, and maybe they already are. This would be my message. So, gut feeling tells me it's a negative message.
Agreed.
Yeah, good.
I hope I answer your question, Mohammed.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's a great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right, Mike. I know you have a question for Janusz.
Well, first I'll say, Nima, you're the one who said Lukaku was going to have a big season, so I'll give you the credit. I mean, I was on Janusz's side and Mo's side that I didn't think he was going to be that great for Inter, so I'll give you the credit. You said he was going to have a great season, so that I'll start with that. My question for Janusz, it's about Milan Skriniar. So his first couple seasons with Inter, I believe he played like a top 5 center back in the world. I thought he was excellent. I thought he's been great. I don't want to say he's taken a step back, but maybe not as played as well this season compared to his first couple seasons with Inter. Now, I know a lot of that talk is about because of the defensive style that Conte plays compared to what Spalletti plays with a back 3 instead of a back 4. Now, how difficult is it for a defender to be playing in a back 4 and making that transition into a back 3, and you think is that the reason why he hasn't maybe played as well to his potential this year?
Yeah, it's a funny one because I don't necessarily it's a difference, but if you're center back, it's not a massive one. In fact, you have kind of a little bit less to worry, don't you, right? Because there's 3 of you. Because remember, especially the way Conte plays, that's 5 in the back when you don't have the ball, right? That's the beauty in a sense of Antonio Conte, in the wide areas, which totally changed on the Spalletti. And I don't want to change the subject, but, you have to have these mules. It's funny to me that, it's understandable that Perisic had to go. You're talking about Napolitano, who's been great, that just because the system had to be sold, which is crazy to me when you play well and you surplus to requirements. But I think with Skriniar, my only issue with him is just that little bit of mobility, because he's smart, he's intelligent, he sees and understands the game, but there may be something to him because look what's happened to Godin, right? He's another player that's never played in the back 3, not that I can remember under Simeone. And I think it would be too easy for us to say that Godin, the age has caught up with him, because I don't believe in that. He's just as strong, just as hard. And so with Skriniar, because I think I would feel comfortable with an extra center back there, because I know there's a little bit of less space to cover. And I don't know, because I don't know what the instructions for Conte are in terms of how much freedom he gets to go forward, how much pressure is he put under in terms of bringing the ball out of the bag, because that sometimes causes you a little bit, right? Because that confidence zone is a little bit different. So, some of these things when we look at it, and although I hear what you're saying, I don't necessarily think it's a massive drop off in Skriniar. Do you think that it's been a big one?
I don't think it's been a big one. What I've definitely noticed is that in previous years, I've seen him make those runs from the back and, not attacking, but like he definitely take that ball and move a little forward. I don't see it as much this year as I've seen it in the past.
Well, but that's the thing. That's why I mentioned that, because I think that's in a back 3 that becomes a little bit different, because you leave it. But again, there's that confidence there. I will tell you this, even though I don't know if I could ever play for Antonio Conte, because he would drive me crazy. It's unbelievable. Well,
we agree a lot on that, you and me.
he has players on remote control, and that's great. But to hear somebody always telling you where to go, where to pass, where to go, I've been under a coach like this, and trust me, no matter how much you want to tune it out, but I do want to give him credit and maybe make an excuse for Skriniar, maybe even for Godin. I don't know if people recognize how much that change of system in 1 year, that's massive what he's done. He comes in, not just back 3, but obviously the wide players. Look, Candreva was done under Spalletti because under Spalletti, the roles of white players were different, right? They were encouraged to come inside. You have to have a certain amount of pace and skill to beat players, which of course Candreva didn't have. Napolitano was wonderful. Perisic, when healthy, was still dangerous. So I'm just saying, when you look at somebody like Skriniar or Godin, I would encourage everyone to look at the whole system, because it's absolutely different. It's not just that it's a 3-5-2, but all of a sudden you're talking about Antonio Conte, where players like Candreva and Ashley Young comes in, and Moses, which is no surprise, is because they're workhorses and they have to keep the width, so they have to stretch you, and they also kind of, even though without the ball they have to become defenders, they get caught in transition, and maybe, just maybe, the back three is under a little bit more stress because of that. I really have to give Inter and Conte credit for where they are, because I know that system, the way he plays it, is so tough to just switch over in one summer. I'm telling you guys, playing for him, it's not easy, and I am very. I hate to give Conte credit, not because I dislike it. Well, no, it's not even that. I just think, because I don't even know why I'm saying that, because I think he's a good manager for short term, that's for sure. But I think he's done a tremendous job, guys. I really do. I don't know if we, to pick on him. Yeah, you can here and there, but you tell me, you wouldn't pay for that season. You would, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, before going into it, for sure. I think any problems that I've had with him has been the fact that I think that he creates problems as well off the pitch in his behavior and his almost frantic, and the fact that he when he's upset about something, he always preaches about the team coming first and putting yourself before the team. But when he's upset with something, the team, the club, everything flies out the window, and he doesn't care, and he fights his way out from every club he's been at.
I would agree.
Yeah, so I think my issue has been with that and then also the difference that being that, Juventus are a much more stable club than Inter are internally, and when you have a volatile personality and come into a volatile club, match meet plutonium. What could go wrong? Like that's the kind of criticism I've had towards him. But yeah, for sure. I mean, no one can complain of what the results on the pitch have been. For sure.
I like I like Inter. I like Inter better than I like Juve. The makeup of the team. I don't know where it's going to come out, because they are deep to a degree, and they obviously have great experience for the last few years, but that midfield at Inter, still some question marks, but there's a number of combinations you can put together with two strikers like like them. I mean, Inter is a good club. That's why it's kind of what's happening right now. It's rubs me the wrong way, because I know it's going to have implication in the end. Yeah. It just will, and it shouldn't be done like this.
Agreed. Alex, did you have a question for Janusz?
Yeah, I do. It's on Christian Eriksen, who we haven't seen a whole lot out of yet, and partially that's because these last two matches have been postponed. How do you see his fit in Conte's system, Janusz? And you think it might be beneficial to experiment with more 3-4-1-2 with Eriksen, or can he really be maximized in the five-man midfield? What do you think?
Yeah, 5 men, but I really think that Christian Eriksen is almost with a mind for next season, don't you? I mean, it was protracted. I think they probably wanted to get him earlier if they could have, right? Because of everything that was happening at Spurs. I think you could tell before the season he wanted to go. But he's the sort of player that I think can fit anywhere in the midfield five. And I mean, don't you think that? I mean, if Sensi wasn't injured as much, right? I mean, he's sort of a little bit like that role. So I think he was fine with Sensi, but here you have Eriksen, who kind of give that freedom, because Inter under Conte, or any team under Conte, is always going to have a good defensive base, where you can actually allow a player to do the creative stuff and maybe ask less of him defensively, right? I mean, I think Conte, I think in many ways that's why Conte played the 3-5-2, because he knows that. And, a lot of managers don't want to do that, right? They expect everybody to work hard defensively. And by the way, I'm not saying that Eriksen doesn't. So I don't think you change the system of play for Eriksen, because I think that's your question, Alex. you can play him on each side. You can play him in front, sort of the trequartista role without being in a system where you have that, one behind the two strikers. You know what I mean? Just a trequartista. He's that sword that I can do that. And by the way, I would also see, especially in Serie A, a time where if somehow Conte went to, let's say, two holding players, I could see him playing alongside Brozovic. Do you know what I mean?
What about
a little bit deeper?
So you think he'll play deeper? Because I've always thought that if that 3-5-1-1 with the two sitting midfielders, as you say, but one of those would be Brozovic and Sensi, or Brozovic or someone else, but with Eriksen playing in that number 10 role behind Lukaku.
Correct. That's what I've said. That's how I see him. But I also, my comment was that I could actually see him playing a little bit deeper as well in Serie A. I don't want. This is not a comparison, by the way, but you can see him doing a job that Pirlo has done for Juve and Milan for years, couldn't you?
Yeah.
You could see him in a Pjanic role, couldn't you? I mean, better version of Pjanic. So I don't think that's why he was brought in necessarily, but I see Eriksen in that system playing just about everywhere, and because he's played left side of the midfield. You know what I mean? Inside, and I'm talking inside positions, not wide positions.
Yeah.
So, but I think he's more of a project. The way it happened right now, he's a project for next year.
Agreed. I agree. Speaking of that, I wanted to ask you, I mean, I guess we have to divide this up because of the mess that's happened. And obviously on Wednesday, they're going to sit down and try to plan the rest of the season and to try to find a way to make this as fair as possible on everyone. So I'm going to ask you if this wasn't, I mean, if we look back to before this outbreak and these postponed games, what was your, if things had progressed normally in terms of the calendar, who do you think would have won the Scudetto, and your top four or top six, actually, from 1 to 6? How would that have looked? And also, do you think it will look differently now given the change of the calendar?
Well, I think it does. I mean, you have now 2 less games already, right?
Yeah. 8 points behind and 2 games in hand. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
yeah. Now it's
how does that not change? I mean, you play now, and by the way, because I think because it's Inter, it's Juve, and all that, but this makes a massive difference for the relegation, for everything. Let's not forget about the smaller teams, right?
Absolutely.
It makes a big difference. That's why I just think you make a uniform decision, even if 1 weekend you postpone everything, every game.
Agreed.
Whatever it is, I just think from that standpoint it's mishandled. And I know there is no ideal way of doing it, right? Because somebody will want to go to the game. Why not allow the fans to watch their beloved teams? But I think when it comes to that, the competitive advantage has to be looked into. I mean, otherwise, why play?
Agreed.
What is the point of that, especially when it's this? Look, before that, of course, it was between Juve and Inter, but for the longer Inter stayed and pressured Juventus the way they have, where Juve had to answer every weekend, it seems. I've been doing Juve's game, every Juve game here because ESPN, probably because Cristiano, right? And Mike will know that at TSN, same, but I've done a lot of Inter games, and it was just amazing, how much pressure Juventus were under. And so. And not because I'm on this podcast, but I'm telling you, I don't like what's happening at Juve. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing for them. They, I mean, I'm going to go as far as to say is even somebody like Cristiano Ronaldo, as much as he's scoring, I think they're sacrificing Gonzalo Higuain there for no reason whatsoever. Because I think Higuain should play more, and than he has. There is still dependence and concentration on Ronaldo, which takes away from others. But anyway, so I think it would have been. I think Inter. I'm telling you, I think Inter, and I've been fighting back and forth. Now it's all changed. And of course, Lazio is throwing, a wrench into all of it, because none of us really thought they could be on a run like this. Credit to Simone Inzaghi. I mean, they're just an incredible run. It's still hard to think that they can keep this up, right? I mean, you say to yourself, if they lose one, they may lose two. It's sort of that type of thing.
Yeah.
But of course, Lazio would be in the three, and Atalanta, what they're doing is again a story that, even though it's been talked about more, still the entire world is missing. Even though they're in the Champions League, what they've done, I think people are just waking up to it. But they're only waking up to it when they do something in the Champions League and kind of nobody really watches them. And again, 7 goals. I mean, it's just an incredible story over the last 2 or 3 years, losing, great players to their rivals, right? And it seems it doesn't affect them in any way, not playing at home and, all that stuff. It's just a great, great story. So I think that would be your top 4.
Okay. Who do you think will be the who do you think will win the Coppa Italia? Who will finish 5th and 6th, and who will be the capocannoniere?
Oh, now you're
I know.
talking.
Yeah, I know. Everyone who's on here does it.
Well, yeah. I mean, then I have to switch. I have to look it up. I forget. Inter lost to Napoli, right? I mean,
yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if Napoli get through here.
Yeah, neither would I.
Because Inter hasn't played, you have that advantage, of course, right? And you go in, to a place where I think, if you look at Napoli, that's their season right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I won't be surprised. Who's in the other one? Juve against Milan. Juve will get through that. I'll give it to Juve because I'm on the spot and I have to think quick. So
yeah,
let's give it to them the way it's at. Well, what else did you ask me?
No, who will finish 5th and 6th? So the Europa League spots.
For the Europa League spot. So I've had the top 4, which I'm sure is no surprise to anyone, right? I mean, Roma will hang on, right? And you'd have to imagine, if I had to, with the mess in Milan now, I would have to imagine that Napoli will hold on to it.
What about, do you think Ciro Immobile will break the record and score more than 35 goals? Or 36 goals? Because he's not far off. He's 27 now.
I mean, he could. Yeah, he could, because he's taken penalties, right? Everything he touches, he scores. So it's not impossible for him to do it. It's always going to be tough. He's going to probably come close. I mean, this is a guessing game, right? I mean, because it's 27-36, that's not impossible. The rate that he's scoring right now, I wouldn't put him past him because, set pieces, he does that well. And Lazio in such form right now that you know how it is. When everything, when you're scoring goals and your team is doing great, you that switched on that little 2% even more, which often gets you there. So I don't see why not. He could.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much, Janusz. And before we let you go, do you have anything coming up that you want to plug? Then go right ahead.
I know. Yeah, I mean, just doing Serie A again. I don't know my game this weekend yet, although it may be affected. I didn't do any games this past weekend, because of the postponements. So I don't know how that's going to pan out. I do have a German Pokal game, Bayer Leverkusen against Union Berlin on Wednesday on ESPN and. Doing a Premier League show, 3 hours on radio of probably some VAR decisions and, all this crazy stuff that happened. But, the usual stuff. Can't wait for Serie A to come to some conclusion. And I really, really do hope that they take into account not just the race and the competitive advantage at the top, but also in the middle and the bottom, because it affects everybody here. And as you know, that's lives of players or supporters and people that work at clubs, and makes such a big difference if you're in Champions League or Serie A or Serie B. So to me, it's a simple decision, play, close doors, play it out. This will work itself out.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Janusz. Thank you for coming on. Hope you want to come on sometime in the future. Thank you so much. And to everyone who can listen to Janusz, I can definitely say check him out. He's on Twitter as well, at Janusz Michallik. Thank you so much, Janusz.
Thank you, guys, and sorry for that I didn't get a chance to interact a little bit more with you guys.
No, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for all the questions, guys.
Thanks, Janusz. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Janusz.
Thank you. Ciao. Thank you. Right, that was Janusz Michallik. Thank you. I want to thank him for coming on, and let's move on to it's to talk about what happened. I want to do a little timeline for everyone to understand what's going on and why everything has gone so mad that it has. Basically, last week on Monday, on the 24th of February, and through Wednesday, from Monday to Wednesday, Tutto Sport, Corriere dello Sport, Gazzetta dello Sport, Repubblica, all these media outlets kept reporting that Juventus was against postponing was against postpone. It was against playing this game behind closed doors, and that the decision would have to be made if it was to be played. It had to be played behind closed doors because of the Italian government's restrictions in the region of Piedmont, because of the to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. On Thursday, a consumer advocacy group mentions that if Juventus does not pay back tickets and reimburse fans, they are going to sue them on behalf of all the consumers who have something to raise. And on Thursday, it was also decided that the game would be played. The Italian government confirmed that they had left the option open to the Serie A, the Lega Calcio, that the game can be played, but it can only be played behind closed doors. Whether or not to postpone it or not is up to the Lega Calcio to decide. And the decision was made that they would play the game behind closed doors. That was true until lunchtime on Saturday, the 29th of February, when all of a sudden, out of the blue, less than 24 hours, or just over 24 hours that the game was going to be played, the Lega Calcio decided on its own, without talking to any of the clubs involved, saying that they were going to postpone the game until May. Now, the thing that made Inter go crazy is that Inter's game with Sampdoria is yet to be decided when it's going to be played. So they just decided to move this game to May, move the Coppa Italia final to the 20th, not taking into account that Inter also have to play Sampdoria, and not taking into account that Inter and Juventus and all the other teams are already in European competitions, which meant that if any of them went to the semifinals or even the finals of the Coppa Italia and the Europa League or Champions League, it would turn into 12 games. They would end up playing 10 games in less than 20 days. Whoa! Then it goes on. Then Beppe Marotta on Saturday goes out and has a very calm stance to this, but Inter fans absolutely lose it, and this explodes, and not just about amongst Inter fans, but journalists, everyone, fans of all teams, and directors, and everyone just loses it, and says that this is not, you can't just do this, you haven't spoken to us. President Dalpino goes out and says that he has the support of all the Serie A clubs, only for all the Serie A clubs, 9 of them at least, to publicly go out and say that they absolutely did not support this decision. They were not consulted. And here we are. They decided late last night, the Italian government decided to extend these bans on public events, including sporting events, until the 8th of March, and therefore, if these games are to be played, they have to be played behind closed doors, which meant that Inter, Sassuolo, and Bologna, Juve, etc., have to be played behind closed doors. Now, there's a financial element to that as well, because let's remember that Juve did not want to reimburse their fans; they would lose 5 million euros. None of the other clubs would want to use that money as well. So they've set a dangerous precedent here, and that's where they're stuck. They basically have put themselves in this position. I mean, even if I tried to, even if I if I sat at home with a pen and paper together with all you guys, if we all met up and try to think of a way to screw this up better than they have, I think we'd fall short. What do you think, Mo?
No, I mean, look, it's difficult to wrap one's head around who could have possibly imagined that this outcome or these series of decisions would result in anything but a catastrophe to the league. Like, honestly, it's the most ridiculous set of decisions taken. And you know me, like I'm not big on conspiracies or whatever. I mean, I am in general, but not when it comes to calcio. I think a lot can be decided in over 90 minutes on the pitch. But Dalpino's decision to selectively postpone certain games that only benefited Juventus can only be interpreted in one way. I mean, not only do they only benefit Juve, but they fly in the face of any ostensible concern for public health because of the lower tier games being played as well. So it's absolutely nonsensical.
We have to say that this is not a health issue, even though the Serie A, because they lied. It's an absolute lie, because if it was a health concern, the government, the Minister of Sport, the Italian Minister of Sport, and the Italian government were adamantly clear. This is not, they are okay with playing the games behind closed doors. So the notion that they try to blame this on the coronavirus was already, this was already debunked before it was even released. And
I'll tell you. Sorry, if I may, I'll raise you one. I see this isn't a health concern. If it's an alleged commercial concern, the commercial damage that has been done to this league because of these ridiculous myopic decisions are far more damaging than the 5 million euros that Juventus would have had to reimburse, under which the guise of game postponement might then have been. This can only be, if you're objectively looking at this can only be seen as a competitive decision. It's a league that is in cahoots with an entrenched league leader. The league leader realized that playing behind closed doors not only would have short-term financial implications, but would also damage their competitive position against their strongest rival, which it would have. I mean, I was gloating last week on the podcast. I'll admit, every Inter fan was relishing the possibility of going to the Allianz Stadium with behind closed doors. So I mean, we have to agree that
of course it is.
As a public health issue, this plays very favorably into Inter's hands. But to view the cluster F that happened since then. I can't remember if we can swear on this podcast.
No. Well done. So
to view these set of subsequent decisions in anything but like rebalancing the scales in Juve's favor, footballing wise, it can't be viewed otherwise, because commercially it's destroyed far more value than the value that it would have destroyed in the terms of game reimbursement due to forced door closure, let alone the potential implications of loss of revenue for sides that might have won and proceeded in Europe farther and generated revenue and blah blah blah. So I mean, even if we don't play these scenarios out, the damage to the league, the damage to the first three-way competitive Serie A race in almost a decade is just immeasurable. So this was Agnelli calling up the Lega, the Serie A, telling them, guys, we need to sort something out. A quick, as usual, knee-jerk decision was made. Juve haven't been playing well. They just lost to Lyon. Backs against the wall. They can't risk another loss. Everyone realizes that this could be the beginning of a proper unraveling. What do? Push it to May. No one looks further than that, But of course.
Alex, what are your thoughts on that? Because I know that you and I were DMing. We were fuming, both of us, and could barely contain, because it was everything for the reasons that everything that Janusz and also Moa said. I don't even know how they go from here.
I'm still fuming. And the bottom line, Nima, is that 2 weeks in a row, Serie A has canceled multiple matches. I think it was 4 the first week and 5 the second week. They postponed these matches, but they're not solving any problem. They're just kicking the can down the road, because, I mean, first and foremost, they've set this precedent now of, postponing matches under the guise of trying to, be in the best interest of public health. I think we all agree that's a charade. But now that you've set that precedent with this masquerade of public health, guys, I'm no public health expert. I only play one on the radio, but every time I log into the internet to check how many, corona cases there are in Italy, the number's not getting smaller. Okay, so they're curing this thing anytime soon. It may be a matter of weeks, it may be a matter of months. Nobody seems to know when this problem is going to go away. So once you've already set the precedent that we're going to be, postponing or canceling matches because of a public health crisis, so what does that mean for this coming weekend? What does that mean for the weekend after that? Are they suddenly going to do an about face and say, well, we no longer care about public health, so now we're going to play the games? Like it's such a fiasco. I mean, the bottom line is, Nima and Mo, you both said it very well. They had the approval of the government to play these games behind closed doors. I know it sucks. I know the optics aren't good, especially when you have a big game like Juve Inter being played in an empty stadium. And I know that was one of the reasons that Dalpino cited for why he wanted to postpone that game, because it would be embarrassing to be, to be going at the same time as El Clasico in an empty stadium. But okay, is that really more embarrassing than the problem you've now created by canceling all these matches? Like they cannot seem to even get their heads out of their what. I'm going to follow Mo's lead and not curse when I say that. I mean, this is such a fiasco where, and we touched on it a little bit, but we didn't really dive into it head first. In that now Marotta and some of the other club heads are saying, well, yeah, I mean, we're going to refuse to play a game in an empty stadium since Juventus already refused to do that and got their way. So what does that mean for this coming weekend? Like, are we going to reach a very high stakes game of chicken where, the league says, I know that last week we didn't want to play closed door matches, but this week we're going to play closed door matches. And now the club presidents and CEOs say, no, we don't agree to do that. Guys, I hope that, the two matches that Inter have had postponed are the only matches they get postponed from here on out. But who knows? Because I don't see this problem going away anytime soon, and it's a problem that they basically have created for themselves.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Is that, I mean, when they what they don't seem to understand is that when you do the bidding of one and set that kind of precedent, Bologna, why should, I mean, I think their CEO said it best when he said, we will under no circumstances accept to play Juve in an empty stadium. And why would they? It's money for them as well. Like, that's what I mean. They have created this absolute mess out of nothing, and they've lied about it. That's the worst thing. It's one thing to make an uncomfortable decision and people are upset, but when you blatantly lie, they put out a statement that was they knew was untrue. They said it was because of the coronavirus they're going to postpone it. That is manifestly, categorically, empirically a lie. The government decision, the government gave them the choice, and they stayed out of it and said, either you play behind closed doors or you postpone it. They chose to postpone it. And they chose to do it 24 hours before kickoff. Those are the facts. Now, you can paint them any way you want. And then they say that, well, we gave Inter the possibility to play on the Monday. Why? And they said no. Why? Because all of a sudden the coronavirus, the threat of it has disappeared? No, that's nonsense. And the notion they gave was, well, Marotta was very clear. He said, no, we declined that for three reasons. One, so the game would have been played only with Juve fans, without a single one of our fans being allowed to enter it, because that's the law to prevent the coronavirus spreading. Secondly, they declined it because they're going to play Napoli on Thursday. They would have had one less day to prepare for the Coppa Italia semifinal, and they already have a depleted squad. And thirdly, if Rai, who owns the rights to the Coppa Italia, they would have also encountered problems in rescheduling it, because they wouldn't have been able to show it, or when would they been able to show it. And that is an Inter concern, because they make money off of all the times they're shown on TV. So this was just a bad deal for Inter. and they say, well, Inter are just being, whiny old Inter. No, you think that this is like the Middle Ages, where this is a feudalistic society, and the lords decide, and you get to do whatever you want, when you want, how you want. You get to look people in the eyes and screw them over, and they're just supposed to take it. No, they're not going to do that. Why should they? So I mean, it's ridiculous. These arguments that they're putting back. I mean, this isn't. I actually want to go a step further. I don't think this is. I'm not going to even blame Juventus for looking out for Juventus interests. The people I blame are the people who are only looking out for Juventus interests, but are employed to look out for the Serie A's interests. Those are the people I blame. I don't blame Agnelli for looking out for Juventus' interest. That's his job. That is literally his job. I blame Dalpino and the rest of these incompetent clowns and puppets who are incompetent and have no idea what they're doing, and they're not putting the best of the league ahead of everything, but they're putting their allegiances above everything else. And it's so blatant to see. I mean, the fact that this idiot went out and said that he has acted on the behalf of the Serie A as a whole, and within minutes everyone came out and said, everyone except Juve, Udinese, and Milan went out and said that the league has been falsato. So it's so blatant, and it's embarrassing. Mike, sorry, I went off on one. Mike, you wanna add something to all this?
My head's gonna explode right now after hearing all these things. Oh man, listen, like we got a big problem on our hands right now, and it's going to be I think we're at a major disadvantage going forward. I think the way Mo said it, Juve. I think this started a few days ago when Juve lost to Lyon, and there was the potential of an unraveling starting to happen. Juve potentially going out of Champions League, losing their first leg, and now their biggest game of the season, the biggest game of the entire league, was this weekend. And if Juve didn't get that result, there was going to be some, massive problem for them. I don't think for 1 second that Juve didn't. They wanted this match postponed. There's no way that they didn't. And I think there's a financial element to it as well. If they had to play this in front of no fans, 5 million euros. I know these are big clubs, but that's a big chunk of change, and having to potentially give that back to fans, that's something that they definitely would not have liked. So that they for sure, like, playing on Sunday, playing on Monday. What's the difference? I don't understand it. Just if the government is saying you can play behind closed doors, then play behind closed doors. I don't understand why it's changing over and over and over again. This problem is not going away anytime soon. 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, it's not going away. Every time, like Alex said, it's getting higher and higher and higher and spreading and spreading and spreading. This game should have been played behind closed doors, and now we're at a major disadvantage going forward. And I will say this: you look at the table right now. I'm gonna say that my personal view is that Lazio are now the Scudetto, my favorite to win. And
absolutely,
and has a lot to do with this.
Absolutely. I mean, Sorry, go. Sorry.
Well, they played their games and they've won them, and now Juve's got to still play Inter, and then there's points there that could go either way. And if, say, Juve loses that game or a draw, like, what an advantage they have at this point. And go ahead.
No, I would go so far as to say that you for me now, this is all in Lazio. Lazio are definitely going to finish. They're definitely going to finish above Inter. That's for sure. They're going to finish second. There's no doubt in my mind about that. What's going to happen also now is that the Scudetto will be decided when Juve play Juve play Lazio at the Juventus Stadium in May. That's when it's going to be decided. Up until then, Lazio have a game a week. They're not going to be bothered by anything else, and they're going to continue to win. They have a week to prepare for each game. I would say that they're the favorites to win the Scudetto now. To be perfectly honest with you, I think they are.
I think so. I think for sure they are. They played their games and they've won them. And
yeah.
Let's not forget, they keep pushing these games back. They don't know when the heck they're going to play the Samp game. And I think they're going to try to decide. I mean, my personal opinion is they're going to decide once they find out what happens in Europe. Like, if Juve get eliminated or Inter gets eliminated by Getafe, I think that's when they're kind of try to squeeze out where they're going to put those games. But just at the moment, we don't, and especially with Coppa Italia as well, with all these teams, with Inter, Napoli, Juve still in it, and Milan, that's where they're going to just, I think, wait a little bit longer. But they can't wait too long, because guess what's coming around the corner? Euros are coming around, and they cannot push it too deep because the players need to be released at a certain time. So they're going down a road that I just don't think there's a solution, and that's all I'll say, and I hope they can figure this out.
No, they got a meeting. Let's just say that they got a meeting on on Wednesday to try to sort all this out, and we'll have to wait and see what happens then. But I mean, we're just going to have to press on and expect that Inter will play Napoli away on Thursday. But who knows with these clowns in charge, and also with Inter Sassuolo on the weekend as well. I guess we can't say too much about those games, but if we kind of assume that they are going to be played and they've somehow magically resolved and managed to de-escalate from a situation where everyone is pissed off, then I going into Napoli, I think this is a game where Inter actually can win. I think Inter are angry. I think Conte's. I mean, you think he's happy about this? And we all know that he's got the emotional, he's got the self-control of a nuclear bomb. So he's going to definitely be angry, and he's going to get all that anger into his players, and they're going to come out there and chew barbed wire when they play Napoli. And I think they're going to completely hammer Napoli away, if I'm perfectly honest. Because I think this is a title that he wants to win. He's never won it. What do you think, Mo?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I know that I've been downplaying our chances and our ambitions for the Coppa Italia, but I think I can only see this week, in the grand scheme of things, maybe it might affect our position in the league detrimentally, maybe not. But I think ultimately they've lit a fire under everyone's bum, especially when we were thinking that Inter started showing a bit of complacency, etc. I think, like you rightly said, ultimately, I think it's going to play in Inter's favor, whether it's in the Europa League, in the Coppa Italia, or in both. So I think I'm far more optimistic about progressing through the Napoli game this as we stand today than I did last week.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. What about you, Mike? You think Inter will do the job against the Napoli?
Look, Inter's played Napoli twice already this year, and there were two very different matches. Like Inter won at Napoli for the first time in so long back in January, but I felt it was a totally different match when in the first leg. So I think, I would think that they're well rested for this game. Would you not agree? Like, they played on Thursday, but not having to play against Juve on the weekend, they don't really have that time to focus all your energy on one thing. And now they've got to use that, a few days later. So I think they should be well rested. I know. Was Victor Moses injured today? I know that's a little piece of the pie. I believe he was. He might not play in that match, but just going forward, I think that this not having to play the derby could maybe help them against Napoli, as long as they can find out what they did right in that January 3-1 win where they completely dominated. But it didn't seem that way when they played the first leg against Napoli a couple weeks ago. So I think they should go in thinking that they should be able to wrap this up and make a comeback for sure.
Alex?
Yeah, I think you've all hit the nail on the head. I think if not for the events of the past week, with the anger that's created, not to mention the extra rest that's created from not playing a game, Inter's going to be the more well-rested team, and with Conte at the wheel, it's hard to imagine they're not the angrier team, because I'm sure he's livid as we are about what's going on here. So yeah, I think I'm looking at maybe a 2-0 or a 3-1. I don't think I would have felt that way if not for the events of the past week. I could have maybe seen Inter go out kind of quietly with a draw, kind of a whimper in Coppa Italia. But I'm actually now expecting this to motivate them a little bit, put a chip on the shoulder. I think they're going through.
Yeah. Okay. let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football. Starting with the positivity, this week's Moratti, which will be presented by Mr. Mo Nassa.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of these qualities.
Yeah, so I was thinking, taking of a play out of the Lega's playbook and postponing the Moratti this week, but indefinitely. But I'd like to also instead tip my hat at Marotta, not for the way he's handled this crisis from the very beginning. I think, like you rightly said, Nima, his first response to the postponement was very measured and very articulate, and then his angry, ripping a new one reply to Dalpino's comments about his comments, just showed showed a lot of heart, showed a lot of reason, and showed that we not only do this management deal well for the club internationally and in transfers, etc., but they definitely are starting to stand up for Inter and make sure that Inter's voice is heard in Italy as it should be, as it always sort of had. So my Moratti for the week is Beppe Marotta.
Agreed. I think what he said when he went on attacking and piling the pressure on the league in all media, I think he spoke with every single media outlet in Milan that was available that wanted to talk to him yesterday. Right, let's move on to something much more negative. This week's Moggi, which is represented by Mr. Michael Gallo.
Well, speaking of the coronavirus, my Moggi of the week goes to Red Bull Leipzig. They had 20 Japanese fans told to leave their game on the weekend because because of fears that they had coronavirus.
Oh my God!
And I had to look at that a few times before I actually believed it, and it actually happened. And the club put out a statement today. And this is what the statement said. It said, ground security personnel had been instructed to intensify checks regarding the admission of certain groups of people due to potential risks. Unfortunately, in this instance, and this is a club statement, unfortunately, in this instance, amidst the great uncertainty surrounding this topic, by which we are currently also affected, a mistake was made on our part with respect to our Japanese guests. In light of this mistake, we would like to extend our apologies. We are already trying to get in contact with the fans in question to invite them to our next home game to try to make amends by the incident. As for our handling of the coronavirus issue, we will continue to work thoroughly on a daily basis with authorities in order to try and reach the best possible solution for all of our guests. And now that's just the statement. Now, I also saw there was the choreograph of Leipzig in that game read "Love and Peace," and it just contradicts the whole situation. And I mean, we laugh about it because it's like, I can't believe this is actually happening, but it's sad also in another sense, because it's just these imagine flying all across the world to go to a game and you're kicked out for a reason because it's whether it's race or whatever. And I would be furious. I almost flew to the Samp game a couple weeks ago that got canceled. I would be furious if it didn't happen. These guys flew there, got in, and got kicked out. So
I don't even know what to say to that. Like,
that's just it's very disappointing that it happened, and I don't think the apology really did any justice either. But it's just embarrassing.
Wow, that was I missed that. Wow. Yeah, let's move on to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. Alex Donald.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Yeah, guys, the Frog of the week goes to one Maurizio Sarri, as the Juventus manager maybe put his foot in his mouth a couple of times in the post-match press conference after Juve fell in Lyon in the first leg of their round of 16 tie in Champions League. Now, he mentioned how, the players aren't really playing with the same speed and tempo in the midfield they play in practice. That's not what gets the frog, though. He was very critical of the officiating, and he said, quote, "In Italy, we would have had 2 penalties in our favor." Ooh, guys, maybe not the best choice of words for a Juventus manager, if you know what I mean.
I mean, hello, Mr. Freud. It's, yeah, I read that too, and I thought it was, I think he continued by saying, but in Europe, they measure by a different yardstick, and I guess we just have to learn. Yeah, well done. I guess you got to give him credit for being honest. He's done something that no Juve manager in history has ever done, and he said, I guess you got to give him credit for that, which kind of explains this entitled attitude that they and their fans have, that they're kind of owed penalties. Speaking of a certain Mr. Gigi Buffon and garbage cans instead of hearts, etc. Right, that's all we had time for this week. I'd like to thank Janusz Michallik for coming on, and as always, thanks for coming on, Mo, and raising a little bit of hope into this gloom.
I hope we start talking about actual match analysis very, very soon, guys.
Amen. And as always, Mr. Alex Dono, thank you for coming on.
I am as well rested as Inter's players. Thank you for having me back.
And Mr. Michael Gallows, good to have you on, Mike.
It's great to be back with you guys. Love talking, love chatting. I just wish we had some games to talk about, but hopefully next week we can have that. Although against Sassuolo, that's another situation that maybe we will have a game, maybe we won't. I don't think much is going to change from now until then. So let's just hope that something gets played in the next 5 to 7 days.
Amen. And as always, I'm your host, Nima Tavalli Ruzzari, wishing you a good week. A semi-final win in the Coppa Italia, and hopefully 3 points in the Serie A, but who knows when these clowns are in charge. As always, sempre e solo Forza Inter.